The world knows it as the Francis Scott Key Bridge. Locals simply call it the Key Bridge. For 50 years, it stood. In seconds, it crumbled, brought down by a massive out-of-control cargo ship that rammed into one of the supports. Authorities say the dolly seemed to lose power and also steering. At least 6 people tonight are still missing. Search and rescue operations at this hour continue. We have team coverage on this unfolding tragedy. Haley Bull is at the White House with reaction from President Biden. Our investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra has more on the bridge and the ship that struck it. But we begin with our national correspondent Bianca Fascini, who is on the ground tonight live in Baltimore. She has been there throughout the day. And Bianca, today officials were emphatic. Their first focus is on the families of the missing.
Hey, Del, that's right. And one thing that we've heard all day from local, state, and federal officials is that the investigation is still ongoing, and it's going to be a really long time before we all get the answers that we want. Take a listen to what Maryland Governor Wes Moore had to say this afternoon.
And this is still very much an active search and rescue mission. And there is not a single resource that we will hold off on deploying. I have already authorized the deployment of everything from air, land, and sea resources to make sure that this search and rescue operation is carried out to its fullest intent.
So here's what we do know. There were 8 construction workers on the bridge when the cargo ship crashed into it. 2 of them have been rescued. We don't know the whereabouts of the remaining 6. And the construction company that employed that crew of construction workers is presuming the rest of the crew to be dead. However, officials here, law enforcement officials, have not confirmed that any of them are dead. They're still very much searching for them in that active search and rescue operation. Now, we learned from the Synergy Marine Group, which operated the cargo ship, they accounted for a full crew, but officials here today, particularly with the NTSB, would not verify that the crew members were all accounted for, so we're still waiting for updates on that. And then in terms of the number of cars that were on the bridge or could have been on the bridge, we still don't know the full number either. We do know that there were underwater drones that showed there were cars submerged in the water, but we don't know how many cars. So ultimately right now, we still don't know how many victims we don't know how many victims there are from this very horrible crash. We do know, though, earlier today that Maryland Governor Wes Moore did say that even though the cargo ship lost power, they were able to issue a Mayday warning, and they alerted Maryland authorities that were then able to prevent further traffic from getting onto the bridge. So even though this was a horrific accident with loss of life, or a potential loss of life, it could have been worse if they didn't issue that Mayday warning. Now, anyone that is watching and is maybe unfamiliar with Baltimore, I do just want to point out that this port is very important to the city. So on top of the very tragic accident that's happening and hurting so many people here in the city, this is something that could also have a long-term impact. Obviously, we don't know when the investigation is going to end. It could take weeks, it could take months, and then there's going to need to be the reconstruction, which President Biden did say the federal government plans on covering 100%. But again, we're still waiting on a lot of details in terms of the victims, and this investigation could go on for a really long time before we know exactly what happened, Del.
Bianca Fascini for us in Baltimore, Charm City. Bianca, thank you very much. In Washington, as you heard Bianca say, the president vowing to rebuild, saying the United States government will foot the bill. Our White House correspondent Haley Bull picks up our team coverage from the nation's capital. And Haley, the White House saying the buck stops at Washington. Why not with the ship's owner and operator?
Well, Del, it comes down to a matter of time. President Biden saying today they do not want to wait, vowing for the federal government to shoulder the cost here. And the White House says they'll work with Congress on this front. But the timeline for rebuilding is not clear. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg warning rebuilding will not be quick and it will not be inexpensive, while Biden indicated a desire to move quickly. Officials have indicated that they will monitor the potential effects of this incident, including on the supply chain. In remarks today, Biden noting the significance of this particular area, both the size of the shipping hub, the amount of jobs that are connected to it, and the volume of traffic that used that bridge each day.
The Port of Baltimore is one of the nation's largest shipping hubs. And I've been there a number of times as a senator and as a vice president. It handles a record amount of cargo last year. It's also the top port in America for both imports and exports of automobiles and light trucks. Around 850,000 vehicles go through that port every single year, and we're going to get it up and running again as soon as possible. 15,000 jobs depend on that port, and we're going to do everything we can to protect those jobs and help those workers.
And like Bianca said, on the ground, both there and here at the White House, the priority, though, this evening remains that search and rescue effort. Now, President Biden did speak with state and local leaders earlier today and was expected to continue to be briefed as the day went on. More broadly, though, Del, keep in mind, infrastructure, particularly funding for bridges across the country, has really been a key focus of Biden's agenda. Of course, there is a lot left to learn about this particular incident, but Biden indicated he does plan to go to Baltimore. Del.
Haley Bowforce live at the White House tonight. Haley, thank you very much. So let's talk about that infrastructure. Our investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra knows more about bridges than perhaps any other correspondent in this country. Patrick, the Francis Scott Key Bridge was part of I-695. It loops around Baltimore. 31,000 cars and trucks use it each and every day. Two questions for you. First of all, how is this going to affect traffic in Baltimore, and how long will it take to repair and rebuild the structure?
Well, there's still a tunnel that is going to alleviate some of the traffic snarls with this bridge being closed, so that is the good news, but still over 30,000 vehicles a day. That is a lot of traffic, and we did not hear how long it's going to take to rebuild this bridge. The governor of Maryland is saying that this is going to be a long-term build, so certainly not something that's going to happen quickly. Very complicated that this is over water. But this was a bridge that had been built in 1977 and really had not had any problems. We've done a lot of reporting about 14,000 bridges all over the country in various serious states of disrepair. This bridge was not one of them. It was listed in fair condition, and in fact, many of the components on the bridge were actually listed in satisfactory condition, which is even better. It was not due for any sort of major repair or maintenance work at all. Construction workers had been filling potholes overnight, as we know, but that wasn't a serious issue. That wasn't something that had to be addressed immediately, and it's not something that was going to compromise the integrity of the bridge itself. One of the major questions has also been, was there any sort of protection around the supports of the bridge? A lot of bridges that are over water, that have container ships going under them, they do have those support systems. And while we have been able to confirm that this bridge did have something in place over those main pilings, we don't know exactly what it was. And did it fail, or was it simply not big enough to protect the bridge? Because the bridge was built in 1977, it was a time before a lot of those cargo ships were as massive as they are today, so it may have just not been up to the task. We did talk to one bridge expert today who told us that even with a protection system, when you have a ship of that size moving that fast out of control, it can do enough damage to actually bring down a bridge. In some cases, there really isn't much you can do, Del.
Patrick, I was just crossing over some of the newer bridges built in this country, one of them in South Carolina. I know you know about the one in New York. Also, I believe that there is one in Georgia. The bottom line is the bridges are changing, but as you mentioned, those ships are much, much larger than they were in 1977. Our investigative correspondent Patrick Terpstra live from the nation's capital tonight. Patrick, as always, thank you very much.